like to welcome you to another edition of Scott Spears Now. Today we're going to tackle a hot topic that's going to take us to London, England. We're going to hop the pond once more and head over to London, England via Skype and talk with Lady Constance Crabtree about the birth of Prince George, the son of Prince William and Kate Middleton, the third person in line to be the king, the monarch of England, behind Prince Charles and Prince William. It's been an amazing week over in London, and we're going to head over there and talk with Constance Crabtree, Lady Crabtree, about all of the comings and goings, not to mention the passing of Margaret Thatcher this year. What is the perception of President Obama in England from somebody who is sitting in her study in England? And we're going to learn a little bit about Lady Crabtree herself and answer some questions that have been plaguing her for years and years and years. Let's get to it without any further ado. It's Lady Constance Crabtree. This is Scott Spears, and with all the royal baby news coming out of London, we have decided to jump the pond, hop the pond as they say, and talk with someone who can give us all the inside information on the royal baby event. She is Lady Constance Crabtree. Lady Crabtree, how are you?
Hello, it's lovely to be with you. You catch us in a heat wave, you know, in England. Very, very hot here.
How hot has it been there?
Well, it's sort of 30 to 35 in places, and we like it about 20. Otherwise, we complain it's too hot. So.
Well, I tell you, Lady Crabtree, you have quite the residence there. How long have you lived there?
Oh, in this particular place, about 15 years, yes. Because my son, you know, inherited Crabtree Hall, the family pile, so I had to move out. And I have a little place on the south coast of England now. It's a lovely little town called Eastbourne. And it's said, you know, that Eastbourne is where people come to die, but when they get here, they forget what they've come for, because there's so much going on. So it's a lovely place to live.
I see a lot of books on the wall back there, Lady Crabtree. Do you have a favorite book?
A favourite book? Well, probably books I've written myself. One of them here, just reaching, I was on sale, you know, in America, called The Secret Journals of Queen Elizabeth II, which is a book of mine. So that's one of my favourites.
And I heard that particular book caused quite a flap between you and the Queen.
Well, it did, actually, yes. I suppose I can talk about this because the years have gone by, but I worked, you see, for Her Majesty as a relief woman of the bedchamber. Now, those who are in America, if you don't know what a woman of the bedchamber does, it's a little bit like a lady-in-waiting. You've probably seen the ladies-in-waiting surrounding Her Majesty, collecting flowers and all this kind of thing when she's out and about. Well, a woman of the bedchamber, she helps Her Majesty for the more private things behind the scenes. Because you might not have thought of this, but if Her Majesty wants to send a birthday card for a friend or something, she can't just pop into her local card factory or whatever you have in America and buy a card. So a woman in the bedchamber will go and buy a little selection for her. And it's all these kind of personal things, you know, a packet of corn plasters, a cup of cocoa, whatever Her Majesty needs privately, really. And it was while I was working for Her Majesty in that capacity that she often used to grumble that there's a lot of rubbish, really, written about her in the press, untrue stories. And she shocked me one day when she suddenly announced that she was going to write the story of her life. She was going to write her autobiography. Well, of course, Scott, I advised her against it. I said, there are so many books on the market about the royal family, there'll never be a market for another one. And I didn't want to see our monarch remaindered, you know, on the bookshelves and put in an embarrassing position. But a few years later, I happened to stumble across Her Majesty's diaries. And it was then it sort of came to me. I remembered what Her Majesty said, wanting to put her own words into print. And I remembered that Queen Victoria, one of our previous monarchs, she actually published extracts from her journals in her own lifetime. And I saw this as the ultimate service that I could do for Her Majesty. And so I published in this book choice extracts from Her Majesty's diaries. Very strangely, Scott, she never needed my services ever again. I don't know why, but there we are. So that's bit of the background to that.
So you never asked her to publish her diaries?
Well, I saw it as the ultimate service that I could do for Her Majesty, and I thought she would be so thrilled when she saw her own words in print, you see.
Well, things happen, I guess, yeah. Well, I tell you what, it has been a big, big week for London, England, a big, big week for the royal family. My goodness, the royal baby is here. It is George. How big was this event?
It was huge, yes, all over the world. I think people were waiting for this baby. And we've been very excited about it. Well, I suppose I would say 90% excited and 10% exasperated, because it's a new heir to the throne, so we're very excited. But 10% exasperated because you'd think it was the only baby that had ever been born, you know. So the acreage that's been written in the newspapers is astonishing. One newspaper on Monday, when he was born, had 17 pages. Now, what can you say? He was born, but they managed 17 pages.
Are you particularly happy that it's a boy? There was a lot of talk, because the rules have changed, that if this had been a girl, even if 5 boys had been born after her, the girl would have still been queen first. But it turned out to be a boy, so nothing changes really. Are you happy with that?
I was delighted. I wanted it to be a boy for that very reason, because I thought that stops all the fuss, because there'll be inevitably people who didn't want this change and for the female to take precedence over the male. So I thought, I hope it's a boy, and then it will stop anybody having this worry. So it's there for the future, but I was very pleased that it was a boy, really.
This couple, Will and Kate, being very trendy, I think people found it very unique that they named the baby George, a very traditional name. What do you make of George?
Well, very strangely, I'd said to people a long time ago, if it's a boy, I would like it to be George, and if it's a girl, I would have liked it to be Victoria, because then we'd had 6 King Georges on the throne, so I thought it'd be nice to have King George VII or Victoria II. As it's turned out, it's George, and I think it's a nice tribute to Her Majesty, because her father and grandfather were both George, George V and George VI, so I think that was very nice. And there's one little detail, you know, that the British media haven't picked up. Maybe you Americans, you're probably way ahead of us, but the Cambridge name, I don't know if you know this, Scott, but I think it was 1917, during the First World War, some of the British royal family had German titles, and they were Battenbergs and the Tecks and so on. And there was this very anti-German feeling, and so they decided to anglicise the names. And so the Battenbergs became Mountbattens, and the Tecks became the Cambridges, because Cambridge is a beautiful city in England, and it seemed very, very English. Now, what interests me is the very, very first person to hold the title, Marquess of Cambridge. When his first child was born, it was a boy, and what did he call it? George. It was Prince George of Cambridge. And Prince George of Cambridge lived until, I think, 1981, member of the royal family, and then the title died out. And Cambridge was revived for Kate and William, and so I think it's quite clever that when the Cambridge title's revived, they called their very first child Prince George, as the first Cambridges did. So I think there's a lot more to it than we know, actually.
Well, that's a very interesting story, very interesting lineage there. An important question people are asking, Prince Charles, what kind of grandfather is he going to be?
I think he's going to be a very good grandfather, probably a better grandfather than he was a father, you know, because people are much more relaxed with the grandchildren because you can give them back. You don't have to have them all the time. And Prince Charles was born in a completely different era, in a time when, not just in the royal family, but in the nobility, didn't see a great deal of their children. They would see them shortly after breakfast, then the children would go off with the nanny. They would see them to bath them for the evening and for an hour or so, and that was it. And that was the sort of world in which Charles grew up in, much, much more reserved. And I think Kate and William, of course, a different era, post-Diana, and much, much more relaxed. And I think Prince Charles is much more relaxed and happier these days in his present marriage with Camilla, and I think he'll make a wonderful grandfather. And the thing I've noticed about him is since this baby was born, all we've seen is pictures of him smiling, roaring with laughter, and obviously very, very happy. So I think he's going to be a wonderful grandfather. Really good.
And what do we make of great-grandmother, Queen Elizabeth?
Well, I'm sure she's thrilled because the line of succession is secure now, isn't it? We have three monarchs with future monarchs with Charles, William, and George. I mean, I shall never live to see George on the throne. They say it could be 2070 or whatever. So I think it's marvellous for her, for a woman who is steeped in tradition and history, to see now that the monarchy is secure for the successive generations. I'm sure she's thrilled. She'll be absolutely thrilled by the name and thrilled that it's a boy. I think it's all worked out absolutely marvellously. Yes.
You know, Lady Crabtree, you had mentioned it there in Charles's growing up days, primitive years. He grew up in a different way. His mother, Queen Elizabeth, was not as hands-on as Diana became with William, and I'm sure William will be with George. Does this make the Queen kind of removed? Do you see her holding the baby and cuddling the baby? Is she that type of lady?
Well, I think she will, but I think it'll be much more in private. I'm not sure, really, we're going to see much of that in public. I don't think we'll see her pushing the buggy across the park and this kind of thing. Probably the first time we will see her holding this baby is at the christening, because her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, was there with Prince William when he was a baby. And I think that the Queen is bound to hold the baby on that occasion. And of course, she'll be the doting great-grandmother in private, but she's a much, much more reserved person in public. And as you say, she came from a totally different era. And very strangely, you know, Scott, I don't know if you can see this, I picked out one of my scrapbooks, and this was when William was born.
Oh, look at that.
There's Diana, Charles, and William. And I've kept all these cuttings. Look, it's a boy.
Wow.
And it's almost a repeat of what we've seen in this week.
Now, wait, is that the Queen smiling? Now, that's something you don't see very often, unfortunately.
That's the Queen smiling, because she was very, very happy in that. There was Charles holding the baby, just as we've seen William and Kate. And what was quite interesting in one of these, if I can see it without my glasses, it says that Charles has set a new pattern for royal fathers by volunteering to talk to reporters on the pavement. Nobody ordered him to do this or even suggested that he might. It was a spontaneous gesture. And so they've made a lot in the papers that William spoke to reporters, but they forget that 30-odd years ago Charles did exactly the same. So it is fascinating when you look back at these old cuttings and see really it's just history repeating itself.
You know, Lady Crabtree, this bothers me as a reporter. Why doesn't the Queen give interviews? What's the fear of that?
Well, I suppose traditionally that our monarchs have never given interviews. There's always been this bit of mystique. I think it's very important to keep the mystique of the monarchy. And so the Queen had made this rule that she would never give an interview, even to you, Scott. I know how much you would love that one, but she won't. And I suppose the trouble is, once she's given it to one, then others would say, well, why have you so-and-so interviewed you? Why can't I interview? And she'd spent her life really giving interviews. And also, so much of her private life she wants to keep private, and she doesn't want to bare her soul in front of the TV cameras and, sort of the royal reality show and so on. So I don't think we'll ever see the like that she will be interviewed. And it's why I did my book, because I thought, well, you can actually see a bit of the personal side of Her Majesty the Queen, but my book's probably the nearest you'll ever get.
One more question regarding the Queen, because I think people in America have a different perception of this. We certainly love the Queen, but I think she has a different feeling in America for a certain reason. A couple of things that people said to me when George was being born, because we didn't really know that he was born at 4:43 London time, but there was talk that because the Queen had to make the announcement and she had to do this event, but she has a certain bedtime of 9 o'clock, and if she was going to bed, she wasn't staying up 5 minutes late, and that was it, and people were going to have to wait until morning. And I remember at her Jubilee, a golden Jubilee, wasn't it, just a few years ago, there were these moving...
It was most recent, yes.
Moving...
Yes.
Moving tributes, and she didn't even crack a smile. Is she a tough lady? Is she a gruff lady?
Well, she's had to be tough in her position, I suppose, but I think perhaps you were hard done by in America, because we've seen so much of Her Majesty smiling throughout Jubilee year, and we had some wonderful photographs in our newspapers on the evening that George was born, because she was giving a reception at Buckingham Palace. She allowed the cameras to be there, and she was photographed, and such beaming smiles. It was wonderful. So I think probably, it's just the angle that's been taken in America, sadly.
Well, what was it about this bedtime? I mean, do you think she would have stayed up later had it been necessary?
Yes, I can't actually believe that's true. I think that's probably a little bit of a media myth. I mean, we were told in this country that she would go to bed at 10:30, but I think on this kind of occasion she would have stayed up. So I would take that with a pinch of salt, as they say.
And I like the Queen. I think the Queen is very interesting, and I think that's why people want to talk with her. I think she's a fascinating woman. And you know what? It's Barbara Walters' last year in the business. I think the Queen should grant her the interview.
Oh, she'd have Oprah Winfrey throttling her and everything else. No. I think the charm is the mystique, the fact that we don't know. And when so much is laid bare across the world about all... I mean, we know more about President Obama than you do, probably. And so I think the same could happen to the Queen, and I think it would be a bad move. And I think she's been very, very wise throughout her 60-year reign. She's never put a foot wrong. And I think it was a very, very wise decision not to agree to an interview, actually.
It's very interesting what you just said. Let's flip the tables, because we don't very often talk to people in other countries, but due to technology and Skype, what is the opinion of President Obama in England?
Well, in England, I think he's very, very popular. He's visited this country 2 or 3 times, and each time he's been very relaxed, and people have enjoyed meeting him. It was a great, great thrill at the time for us in this country when he was first elected, because we don't, to be honest with you, Scott, we don't take a lot of interest in American politics in this country, and the presidential elections, every time you have them, they seem to go on and on for months and months and months. And we end up in this country saying, thank goodness we don't have a president, we don't have to do that. But it was completely different with President Obama. I think in this country, we all wanted him to be president. And there was great, great excitement when he became so. So I think it's very, very popular here. I don't know what it is in America, I couldn't say.
Of course, you do not have a president. You do not have a president, but you do have a prime minister. And as a matter of fact, one of your, I'm not even sure I would say most popular, but certainly longest serving first female prime ministers passed away this year, Margaret Thatcher. And I found it interesting that, at least in American press, it certainly was in the news, but more people talked about her rough attitude that kind of ended her tenure. How was that reviewed in England, and how is Margaret Thatcher reviewed in England?
We had very mixed reviews at this time. There were some that had long memories going back to when she was Prime Minister, and we had a lot of strikes and problems with the unions, miners' strikes and so on in those days, and people who suffered, really. And those families that had suffered during that time still felt very, very bitter when she died, even though all those years had gone by. I think it was 1990 when she went out of office. So, that's over 25 years or whatever. And so there was a lot of bitterness in that respect, and a lot of unpleasantness, really, considering somebody had died. But also there were a lot of tributes to her, and so much admiration, because I think really only Winston Churchill and Margaret Thatcher in this country are considered the great prime ministers, and the only two that have had state funerals in this country. So I think she will ultimately be remembered as a great prime minister.
Did you?
I'm very admiring. Yes.
Did you know Lady Thatcher?
I didn't know her personally, but I saw her on many, many occasions in the flesh, and she was a very, very energetic woman. She hardly had any sleep at night. She used to have about 4 hours and a glass of whiskey. And I admire admired her because she stuck to her principles, you see. And if she was right, going along the right tracks, there were no U-turns. But if she was wrong, then that could be a problem. That was her downfall, really. But I admired her very much. She had 3 terms of office, which is very unusual for our prime ministers in this country. And I think overall the majority of people see her as this very, very great prime minister. She was very, very attractive, actually, in the flesh, Scott. It was strange because she was a very strong woman, but she was very, very feminine as well, and cared a lot about what she wore and so on. And I followed a lot of her fashions. You know, she wore these power suits and so on, and we shared the same hairdresser for a time.
I had heard that.
I was a great admirer of her.
Yeah, I had heard that you had shared the same hairdresser.
That's right, yes. And you see, people don't always know the private side of Margaret Thatcher because she loved wallpapering rooms and hemming curtains and this kind of thing. And she actually knew a lot about fashions. She would take materials for her clothes, she would screw them up, and if they didn't crease, then she would have something made from them. So she was obviously very thrifty because her hemlines were going up and down, and she was keeping the same clothes for years. So a very, very practical woman in many, many ways, yes.
You wouldn't think a word to describe Margaret Thatcher would be thrifty, but there you go. Why not?
Well, she was, certainly with her wardrobe. If you start going back through old photographs of her, you'll see the same suits coming out and out again, the same pearls, and one particular pair of earrings, over and over and over and over again. And talking of thrift, you may not have noticed this, I'm sidetracking slightly, but the Queen has a favourite pair of shoes. They're black with a little gold chain on. And if you look through recent press photos of her, probably for the last 2 years, in about 90% of them, she has this same pair of shoes on. It's obviously very comfortable.
They must be. You know, Lady Crabtree, I want to divert here for a second and talk a little bit about your life, because I found some very interesting facts. You kind of had a rough way to go. Your husband, Claude, had a father who lived to be 104 years old, and when he died, he held on 1 extra day so you could not go to the Silver Jubilee. Is that the truth? Is that, give us the hard copy here.
That's right. I don't know where you get your facts from, Scott, but you're absolutely on the button. My father-in-law, Montfort, absolutely hated me, Scott. My parents were in the theatre, you see, and when I first met Claude, I didn't know that he was heir to a title or anything like that. And Claude's father, Montfort, thought I was a little gold digger. I mean, he never called me by my name, you know. He always called me that chorus girl. And we could be having tea, and he would say, well, that chorus girl, like another cup of tea. Horrid, really, he was to me. And as you say, he lived to be 104, and I think he lingered deliberately. And if he had died just 1 day earlier, I would not have been deprived of my seat at the Queen's Silver Jubilee service in St. Paul's Cathedral. So I've never forgiven him. And he was a terribly, terribly mean man, you know. And my husband, I have to say, Claude, he inherited some of that meanness, because one of the very first presents he ever gave me, I don't know if you've done this to Jessica, but he gave me an eternity ring. And it had the smallest diamond you have ever seen in your life. And he said that he didn't want the glare to hurt my eyes if it caught the light. And when I said I wanted to see the world and he bought me an atlas, well, I should have known then, really, but they say love is blind, Scott. When you get married, you get your eyesight back.
Well, that's very good. You've done a little research on me as well, but that's terrible to have a... Yeah, to have a...
Jessica, yes?
Now say that again.
Have you made an honest...
Well, you know, this is your interview, Lady Crabtree. We'll get to me some other time.
Oh. You're just a bit like the Queen now, aren't you? Keeping reserved, keeping secrets.
That's right. The Queen and I, we don't give interviews. We're the same type of person. Claude was a little rough, but he passed away in 1982. He left you. You've been a single gal since then. Has the eye ever wandered? Has there been another guy?
No. I was always been faithful to Claude's memory. It was 1984, actually, that he died. First the bomb surprise at a dinner party, which was very embarrassing. I mean, as he embarrassed me in life, so he made a fool of me in death. But it left no lasting stain on my double damask tablecloth, so that was a mercy. But no, since then I've been a free woman. It's not to say I haven't had my chances, but I think once is enough, really. And I still wear Claude's ring, so there we are.
It sounds like a real love story you and Claude had, a real nice, happy marriage.
Well, we met. It was my 21st birthday ball, actually. And I was standing there sipping my very first pink gin, and I looked across the room and I saw this absolutely stunning young man, very attractive. Well, in those days it wasn't seemly for a girl to approach a boy, so I just stood and fluttered my eyelashes seductively at him. And it wasn't long before Claude Crabtree came over and asked me if I'd got something in my eye. And I never did see where that stunning young man went to, but Claude and I spent the whole evening dancing together, and after a whirlwind romance on the back of his motorbike, we were married just 3 months later in the very gloomy church of King Herod the Great on the Crabtree family estate. So that was how we met.
And so it goes. Lady Crabtree, you perform, you give speeches, you lecture, you're a social lady. What's the future hold?
Well, at the moment, you see, I keep trying to retire, and people won't let me retire. About 7 years ago, I was asked on just one occasion to give a talk about my life and my work, and I arrived at this function to speak, and they billed it as the Dowager Entertains, which I thought sounded deathly, but I've now been doing that talk for 7 years, and it's still called the Dowager Entertains, because I can't think of anything better. But I keep having return visits. I get asked to open things, close things, present prizes, make speeches, all kinds of things. But my latest project is, because I'm getting this a little bit older, is I'm doing a talk called How to Grow Old Disgracefully.
Oh.
And so that's my latest project, and I think I'm doing the first one of theirs on the 12th of September, and then the bookings for about 2 years in advance.
Well, one tip here: how do you grow old disgracefully?
Well, in my talk, I don't know if I can narrow it down to one. I talk about the fashions for the over 50s, health and beauty, and about coping with modern life. Some of the things we have to deal with, like losing glasses and losing our memories and so on. And a lot of things that you're too young. I mean, what are you, 33? But the people over 50 will identify, I think, with a lot of this. So I don't know if I can give you one tip, but you have to see the whole thing. And I've stolen the title, from an American. I can't quite remember his name now. I think he was called Norman Anthony. And he, in the 30s, he edited a magazine called Ballyhoo. And he wrote this book called How to Grow Old Disgracefully. And then there was an actress called Hermione Gingo, if you remember her. She had a very rich baritone voice and the perfect face for radio. And she did a lot of plays and musicals and films. She was the first to play Madame Armfelt, I think it was, in Little Night Music on Broadway. She was in the film Gigi, singing The Night They Invented Champagne, and so on. But when she got into her 80s, she discovered that if you were a well-known actress, you could go on to these big cruise ships and talk about your life and get a free cruise into the bargain. So she thought that was a very good idea. And she went on to the ship, the Queen Elizabeth II, actually, and when she was on this ship, the organisers asked her what was the title of her talk. And she said, well, it doesn't have a title. And they said, well, you have to have a title so we can publicise it. So quick as a flash, she said, oh, call it How to Grow Old Disgracefully. And so I've sort of stolen my title from Hermione Gingold and Norman Anthony. And she actually called her autobiography the same title, How to Grow Old Disgracefully. And very interestingly, because I think our view of age changes as we get older, they say that old age is always 10 years older than you are. And I do remember when I was in my 20s, and this is genuine, Scott, I thought 30 was terribly, terribly old. I could not imagine getting to 30. and that's how you go through life. And Hermione Gingold wrote in this book that she was lunching one day with her very young goddaughter. And she said to the goddaughter, I used to say, if I ever live to be 40, I'm going to kill myself. Well, then she said she got to the age of 40, so she used to say, if I ever live to be 50, I'm going to kill myself. And then she said, now I'm in my 60s, and I'll just have another bowl of those delicious raspberries. You see, your view of life changes as you get older. And you really don't mind being old, actually. When you're young, you think you don't want to be old, but we have a writer in this country called Barbara Cartland. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, Dame Barbara Cartland. She wore this colour, actually, pink, quite often. And she said being 18 is like visiting Russia. You're glad to have had the experience, but you never want to repeat it.
And so it goes. I tell you, Lady Crabtree, as you've done your research on me, I have done my research on you, and this is very interesting. If people search you out on the internet, you are out there, certainly are. You are listed on Wikipedia, which is the all-to-go-to site now, it seems, for information. But you are listed as a character created by Paul James, not a person. How do you answer that?
I don't know how to answer that. Paul James is my manager. He sort of arranges my diary and my functions. So I think your readers will just have to look at the internet for themselves and make up their own mind about that one. But I'm real, Scott, as you can see.
You certainly are today. In that same bit, it says that you are celebrating 35 years this month, July 2013, 35 years, this Lady Crabtree, has been out there. How's it feel?
Well, it's strange. The years have gone by so quickly. Excuse me. I suppose everybody says that kind of thing, but you see, my husband Claude, when Lord Montfort died eventually at the age of 104, my husband Claude inherited the title, and he became the Knight Baron Crabtree, and I became Lady Crabtree. And in 1978, July 1978, I was invited to a big hotel for a function they were doing. And it was a theatrical event, and because my parents had been in the theatre, they wanted me to talk about them and perform a few comic monologues. So I went along to this event, and I was a very shy, retiring woman, as I still am, but I did 6 monologues for them, and I just thought that was it. People wouldn't want to see me again. That would be the end of it. But an invitation came in for me to judge a fancy dress competition in Devon, which is in the southwest of England. And they sent a white Rolls Royce to pick me up. And I started to cotton on, you know, Scott, that they wouldn't have done that for Mrs. Crabtree, but they did for Lady Crabtree. So I thought, well, there are actually perks having the title. And then I was invited on to a popular quiz show on the panel, on the radio. And suddenly I was there with some of the big, well-known comedy stars of British television and radio. And the invitations just kept coming. And strangely, you know, 35 years later, here I am, and I still get invited to functions and things. And you today very kindly asked me to be on your programme. And so I'm thrilled that after 35 years, this old girl is still in demand.
Will Lady Crabtree ever go away as long as Paul James is still working?
I don't think so, no. I think for as long as people want me, you know, that's, I will carry on going as long as I can. In this new talk that I'm going to do, I do a little bit about a song from a musical called Half a Sixpence. I don't know if that ever crossed the pond to America. But it was written by a man called David Henniker. He wrote Half a Sixpence and all kinds of musicals. And he wrote one particular song, and it's called They Don't Make Them Like That Anymore. And I quote this song in my next show. And I do that because I had a great friend in England called Dame Hilda Brackett, who sadly died in 2002. But on her gravestone, they don't make them like that anymore. And I think I'd like to keep going, and I think I would love to have that as my epitaph. They don't make them like that anymore.
I would have to agree. But by the way, final question, do you ever have an aspiration to come to America? Many have certainly blazed that trail. Hermione Gingle was very popular on Jack Parr for years. Certainly Dame Edna Everage had a great success here on television and Broadway. Do you ever want to do that?
Well, I have actually been to America, but it was 30 years ago. You were just very young tot in those days. And I came to Pennsylvania, and I did a lot of interviews in the local newspapers and things like that. And they couldn't understand a word I said because of the British accent, which was rather strange. And I have been on an American program called Hard Copy, which I recorded in London. And we were just about to start the recording when they told me they had 46 million viewers, which is just the thing you want to be told when you're about to go on the air. Probably the same for your broadcast, I should imagine. So I have a little taste of that, and I've also done a commercial, for an establishment, which I won't name, I won't publicise them, in a place called Galax, Virginia. And I have fans there, apparently, and so I did a little commercial for an establishment, which you can actually see online on YouTube, I think it is. So if I was invited to America, which I have been invited, you see, to Galax, Virginia, after I did this commercial, so yes, I would love to come if you invited.
Well, I certainly hope that happens, and I certainly hope, if you don't make it here in the near future, that you come back with us, because I think you have a very unique perspective on things American, British, and I would imagine anywhere else.
Very kind of you, know.
Well, thank you. Lady Constance Crabtree has been the guest, discussing a lot of things, namely the new heir to the throne, George. How about that? Thank you, Lady Crabtree.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
I certainly hope you enjoyed this interview on Scott Spears Now Hot Topic Edition, talking about the royal baby. Do we in America really have a whole lot of interest in the royal baby? I think so. And certainly fun talking with Lady Crabtree about all going on in the world. I'm sure we'll have her back in the near future. But until next time, this is Scott Spears, headed for the dugout.